Okay, here we go. Welcome back, scholars. I am going to record this video for you. And this is section 3 of our EDUC 6915 final project / plan. So I wanted to make this video for you to kind of explain and overview what will be the third piece of our big final plan project. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you again so that I can make sure that we're on the same page. Okay, so section 3. I'm in the assignments for our course shell on Canvas, and we are looking at the pieces of our big project. As you know, we looked at setting the context and looking at how do we define exemplary teaching as compared to teaching that is not exemplary, and then situating that within teaching in the 21st century as compared to teaching in the 19th or the 18th century, and so on. So we set the context there. And then in section 2, we talked about how that section is an overview of what are frameworks and how do these frameworks help us to know when we're looking at a class. If maybe I'm observing your class, then how do I know that I'm seeing exemplary teaching or not? Is it just because I think you're a wonderful human being and therefore your teaching must be exemplary? No, it's actually got to be empirically based. And that's based in research that's consistently demonstrated these high levels of academic achievement, high levels of cultural competence, and high levels of criticality. And so we talked about how principles in a framework help us to know what to look for, and then how do we define that? What are the pieces of that framework? And those principles tell us what to look for as we're evaluating teaching and learning in general. And now in section 3, we're going to be applying it to our own classrooms. So section 2, we filled out this chart here, and we talked about how the elements of Dr. Muhammad's framework fit with high levels of academic achievement, high levels of cultural competence, and high levels of criticality, and then did the same for Dr. Teemant's 8 principles of enduring learning, which is based on a Vygotskian social constructivist approach to learning. And then we looked at Dr. Hammond's Ready for Rigor model, and also the Teaching and Learning in the 21st Century brief. And we talked about how this one in particular does not address this very critical third component. That is a must-have. And so in section 2, you filled out this chart and talked about it, explained it, and then you selected whichever one of these 3 with the 21st century component fits your particular setting, and you're linking it to the Utah Effective Standards, teaching standards, as well as your own core curriculum for your teaching area. So we talked about how the Utah Effective Teaching Standards are helpful, and they do complement the exemplary teaching principles that we have over here and lined out in these three models here, but they're not the same. And so because we have to be accountable to the school district, to the parents, to our administration, to the state, we are accountable to all of these stakeholders. We are able to say how our exemplary teaching that we are measuring with these models fits within the Utah Effective Teaching Standards, and how we are reaching and meeting and teaching the core curriculum for our area. So we're covering all of our bases, and we can say to our stakeholders, yes, we are addressing what we are responsible for in a way that fosters exemplary teaching. And here's how you will know. So section 3 then builds on how in section 2 you have discussed this chart, and then the second part of section 2 you are choosing one of these 3 models or frameworks for exemplary teaching and addressing the 21st century component of it, and talking about why you chose that one for your particular classroom. So you can see how section 1 and then section 2 are building, and now we're going to go into section 3. And as always, you want to make sure that you have headings and subheadings so that it's easy for your reader to follow what you're talking about and why you're talking about that. So if you're not sure how to do headings and subheadings, make sure that you look at APA's formatting. In education, our research tends to be formatted in APA style, where the research that I do in sociology, they have their own formatting for that. So I often have to switch back and forth between the two, but just know that it needs to be in the latest version of APA, and it'll tell you and give you examples of how to do headings and subheadings. And so I believe Purdue has a very nice website for that. And throughout your whole paper, you should be transitioning so that each section flows into the next. And you always have topic sentences, and you do the model of academic writing where you tell me, show me, and then talk about, so what? Why does this matter? So that's your writing, of course, punctuation, those kind of things. Make sure your sentences aren't too long. And as we talked about in the first video for section 1, remember that your drafts are a work in progress. The first thing to get down is, just get your ideas out. It can be very overwhelming with all of these different ideas that you're reading in the modules, and you're studying, and then you're engaging on the discussion board and learning with and from your peers. And so it can be overwhelming as we're moving in such a fast pace through 7 weeks. That happens just so quickly. So if you're, sometimes getting maybe a little anxious, or I know I get so wound up and so full of content that I get writer's block. So try not to worry about your drafts as you get started. Get a draft out there. The one wonderful thing about a draft is that you can always revise it. Just write whatever you're thinking, and then get it out there, and then you can go back and massage and add to and refine and edit and cut. So you can't be too tied to what you have written on the page, and it's going to require you to keep coming back to it. So this one and done kind of writing, it always shows. So you're graduate students, so I know that you already know that, and you don't do that. So don't be overwhelmed if your draft is not the way you want it to be. It is a work in progress, and one draft is never enough. So you come back to it later, have someone else read it, and so on. So in section 3 here, now you're going to be taking whichever framework you chose. Maybe you chose Dr. Mohammed's, maybe you chose Dr. Teemant's, maybe you chose Dr. Hammond's framework. And in section 2, you made your selection and you explained why. Section 3, then, you're going to begin with an introduction and description of your own teaching context. You don't have to say the specific school that you teach in, or even school district, but give us a kind of a description of, like I taught in the 2nd grade, and it was a highly linguistically diverse setting. And I had a lot of learners in my classroom that were English language learners. They were economic refugees. And so give some context to your own teaching practice, how you approach teaching, what a typical routine might be of a day in your classroom. What does it sound like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Maybe you are a high school teacher and you have the history, you teach history, and so you're getting 200 students coming through your classroom throughout the week. And so talk about whatever your situation and school context and content area are. Then you're going to apply the framework that you chose. So what you're going to do is, now that you've described your teaching and learning approach, now you want to take the elements of the framework that you chose and talk about how does your teaching and learning approach match up to these. How do you, if you chose Dr. Mohammed's approach, her framework, how do you address skills and intellect and identity and criticality? What goes well for you? What do you feel like you're doing very well with? What might be some areas of improvement? So tell me, show me, so what? And of course, those are going to be headings and subheadings as well. Okay, so you're actually applying and using the framework to evaluate your teaching, your own teaching. Okay, so that's how you are doing a self-evaluation, and you are planning for your next steps towards exemplary teaching. So an introduction and description of your own teaching context, teaching and learning approaches, and then you're going to apply your framework and use those principles to evaluate your own teaching and learning. And then once you have your evaluation, that's going to be diagnostic for you. You use the principles of your framework and applied them to your classroom teaching approach. Now that's diagnostic. You've got some data for you on your own. Now you're going to make a plan using your data that you just generated from your application and evaluation of using your framework of exemplary teaching. What kind of, what are some meaningful, doable, practical next steps for you? So outline those. Tell me, show me, so what? Why are those important? Make sure that they're actually things that you could actually start doing in your classroom. It would be lovely if we had time in a full semester and then you could start taking data on your plans that you make for next steps forward. How is it going? How are you making progress on what you identified from applying your framework for exemplary teaching? But in this case, we only have place in these 7 weeks for you to make your plan for your next steps, okay? So that is a section in part of section 3. And then what you're going to do is, now you've got your plan for applying, for how you're going to implement and move your own teaching practice forward toward exemplary teaching. And now you're ready to kind of look back at this whole process of section 1, section 2, and what you have in section 3, and discuss it. You know, take a step back. What are, as you look across the sections, what are some main ideas or themes that you want to talk about? What have you learned as you think about what you have written in section 1, 2, and 3 so far? This is your discussion section. And then you're going to write your conclusion and summary. You're going to be thinking about this whole section 1, section 2, section 3 as a whole piece of writing, your whole project. So summarize that and write your conclusions. What have you learned? What kind of questions do you still have? Those are appropriate things to have in your summary. What have you learned throughout this course, throughout this project of applying exemplary teaching frameworks to your own practice? And write your conclusion and put your reference section there. Okay, and that is your whole final project and plan. Do you see why it is a final project / plan? Because it should be a tool for you to use and actually implement, and hopefully it is something that you could actually share with your colleagues and you could use as a school, and you could be part of moving your school, your team, your colleagues forward as you work in your own classroom as well. So I hope that these videos have been very helpful to you as far as giving you some idea of what we are trying to do and why we're trying to do it, and what is the big picture of it, and then how do you get there step by step. Okay, well, I look forward to how you put all of this together and to how your own teaching practice is moving closer to exemplary teaching, as I am always working on pushing my own teaching practice toward exemplary. Okay, so thank you very much for your time and attention, and I'm going to stop our recording and put this online for you. Thank you.